We've had clients who had this happen before we started working with them, and they told me in a law firm with 8 people, he told me they lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The phone just stopped ringing. And the most important thing that you're building, one of the biggest things that people value is the depth of expertise and the reputation. And having to send out a letter like that to your clients, making a public notice of it is just, it's a death blow for many firms.
Happen if your firm's network, your email, your social accounts, or even your client files got hacked? How devastating could it be to your company? More importantly, what could you be doing now to protect your data, your business, and your clients? Our guest this week is Tom Lambotte of Boba Guard Security. He joins us to discuss the preventative measures lawyers should be taking to protect their clients and their client experience digitally. Ultimately, your digital security is your reputation management in today's world. A breach is going to affect not only your clients, but also your colleagues, your vendors, and even your competitors. When Tom joins us, we're going to discuss multi-layered approaches and straightforward, affordable strategies that firms can take across their digital footprint to make sure that they're not one of the 29% of firms that'll experience a breach. This is critical stuff in the 21st century, so let's get to it. I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing in the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. This episode of 5-Star Counsel is sponsored by TextExpander. Supercharge your team with the power of TextExpander. Now, I've been using TextExpander for years, and it's a huge help. I save hours every week by using the snippets to consistently generate pre-written text for communications. This saves me from being lashed to the keyboard, coming up with the right words, and then typing them correctly. I've typed it correctly once, so it's ready whenever I type the short abbreviation I chose. TextExpander does the rest of the typing for me. Now, I started using text replacement years ago to streamline and speed up my time entry. I had a few snippets that included most of the words that I needed for any entry. I'd enter that snippet and then delete the words I didn't need. The best part was not having to type the same phrases over and over again. Telephone conference with, office conference with, preparation for same, and on and on and on. I'm sure you've got the same stock phrases that you can type blindfolded and don't care to ever think about again. Ultimately, it means you can do more with the same resources. Less repetition, fewer errors, and greater consistency. TextExpander is available on Mac, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, and iPad, so you can use your snippets across your programs and platforms. For example, I can respond to a LinkedIn message on my phone, iPad, or desktop with one Calendly link, and all I have to remember is my custom abbreviation. 5-Star counselors can get 20% off their first year by following the link in the show notes or heading to 5starcounsel.com/textexpander. Hey, Tom, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, John. Glad to be here.
So, Tom, we are talking today about internet security, digital security, protecting ourselves from all of the horrible things that can go on in the internet. And the reason we want to think about it is, and you had just mentioned this before we started recording, ultimately, it's a reputation management and how do you run the business such that you don't get embarrassed unintentionally when your email gets hacked and you start sending out through some friend you'd never met before 100 emails a second asking people to click on a link to something they'd never do. So it's how can we avoid these things going wrong? And there are so many ways. And I'm going to just hand it off to you. Tom, where do we even begin on this?
Well, first, I think it's labeling the problem, right? That problem that you described, that's like getting off as easy as they can, right? If you really, when you have a data breach and first you've got people getting, routing info and funds transferred to different accounts and losing that, which you're not covered, right? But if you fall for a data breach, you're responsible to file a notice of a data breach with your DA. And along with that, you've got to imagine you're sending out a letter to every single contact in your database, not just your clients, previous clients, potential clients, your opposing parties, judges, right? Opposing, counsel, everyone in your contact. So, we've had, clients who had this happen before we started working with them. And they told me in a law firm with 8 people, he told me they lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The phone just stopped ringing.
Oh my
And the
God.
most important thing that you're building, one of the biggest things that people value is the depth of expertise and the reputation. And having to send out a letter like that to your clients, making a public notice of it is just, it's a death blow for many firms.
And so this is something where we scheduled this interview a couple months ago. A few weeks before we record, I had a client who had reached back out for work and said, "Hey, I want you to take a look at this agreement." And it had come in through email. And I didn't think anything odd about that because this was one of my clients who does a lot of, he's a coder, he knows what he's doing. And I got an email from him through normal email. Didn't think twice about it. A day or so after we had signed up, he had texted me a link through iMessage, through an email that popped up, first name at firstnamelastname.com. And I didn't think twice about it before I just, blooped right on that link. And I could just hear Tom, you screaming through the ether, like, why did you click on a link from an iMessage you'd never heard from? And sure enough, it did actually take me to a place where here are all the client's documents. But I had that 5-minute terror, the spike of terror and then the coming down for a few minutes that even though I could look and see, oh, here's the company agreement, here are all the documents I was told to expect. No, the Nigerian prince wouldn't have gone this far, or at least they're not going that far to dummy up, a transfer account with all of these documents that happen to have my client in there. But just thinking through, I could have just sunk myself.
Yeah. I mean, it can happen to anyone. And a very similar example with a very famous podcast who I've been on a number of times. He interviewed me that morning, and very popular podcast in the legal space, tech savvy guy. And, he would never think that he would fall for a phishing email, right? The afternoon after we interviewed the podcast, he sends me an email. He said, "Tom, I just got phished. I just fell for it."
Oh,
And so it can happen to everyone. They're getting more and more advanced. In this case, he got an email from one of his colleagues, another lawyer. They were working on something actively, so it wasn't out of the blue. Email signature was exactly the same. He clicked on the link, took him to a website. The homepage looked exactly the same as his friend attorney, and he put in his credentials, and boom. Right after he realized, he's like, "Oh my God, I just got phished." The URL was different when he looked at it closely, but our kind of protection goes down when we see these social cues, right? And so you have to realize cyber criminals are brilliant. They read the Robert Cialdini books on influence. They read all the good latest psychology experiments, and they're leveraging all this stuff. And so they know the more social proof elements they have, the more likely you are to fall for it. And they're able to replicate these at a massive scale now.
right. And so what we can't do is just pull up the drawbridge and say no more email. Unfortunately, that's just not realistic. Some of the things that I've even thought to do as, the baby steps to get started, well, when those emails come in, I'm, sending them to our internal IT people to just have them double check things. And then I can send it out to my firm of watch out for, here's another one. Here's what this looks like. But we're also slowly moving everything to where we're not going to have any internal emails. And it doesn't mean no digital communication. It means email's dangerous. If you're seeing anything coming from me in an email and there's not a client on there, that should be a gigantic red flag. But those are the basic steps. Tom, what should we be doing? How can we start protecting ourselves and our firms from these cyber criminals?
Yeah, I think that the most important way is it has to be a multi-layered strategy, right? So if you think of the old, classic heist movies, there's always multiple different layers they have to get through. So you can't, it's not just like, oh, I use two-factor authentication, therefore I'm safe, right? It's got to be multiple different approaches that layer together, just like a car, right? In order for a car to be safe, they don't just stop with anti-lock brakes and seatbelts, right? The more layers they add, the more different security systems, the safer you are. And so that's really a similar approach that is required for a law firm. The problem that this introduces is that 49% of private practitioners are solos, and 14% are in firms with 2 to 5 lawyers. So for 63%, out of 950,000 lawyers or so in the US in private practice, 63% of those are unable to protect themselves adequately, right? So they might go, okay, I know this cybersecurity thing is a real thing, that I've got to do something about it, but where do I go? So they'll often reach out to an IT company, and then the IT company says, well, sorry, we have a 10 or 25 user minimum, or we have a $1,500 to $2,500 range minimum, which is kind of the standard. And so they end up getting turned back and sent home. And they're like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do now?
Just get hacked. Good luck.
Yeah, just get hacked. And they revert to the ostrich strategy, aka the hope strategy. And there, there's still a very strong underlying belief that I am safe because I am small.
Right.
Right. And that was true 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But today it's simply not. Right. Before, so people say, oh, I'm not going to get hacked because I'm just a solo. It's just me. I'm not going to get hacked because I practice family law. Right. Fill in the blanks. I'm not going to get hacked because I'm in Arkansas and not New York. Right. Everyone's got their limiting beliefs, but they're wrong. And the ABA Tech Report has shown that 29% of law firms have been breached, and that's up from 26% the year before. That's from the 2020 report. So, the trend is not going the right way. And the fear, the impact when it comes to customer service, again, is that reputation. You've got to do everything you can to protect, the name of your firm. And for me, I kind of see the having a notice of a data breach being very similar as having a criminal record, right? It's public records, it can be found. And so if you have short-term plans of selling your firm or long-term vision of selling your firm, that's going to come up at some point, right? If you do have a data breach. So I think it's really important to do everything you can to reduce your odds of getting hacked. So the one is the long-term impact, because that's going to come up. Whoa, I see you had a data breach, 2 years ago or 5 years ago. Tell me about that, right? That's going to hurt the overall value of the firm. And especially if you've got potential clients who Google, and everyone can Google, they're going to find out that you've experienced a data breach. And that's going to be an immediate, blow to, whoa, if they can't protect my data, I'm not going to have faith in using that firm, right? So I think it's really critical there.
So enough horror stories. We know what we want. We want multi-layered kind of, I've always thought about multi-layered as the smallest side of, slicing the Swiss cheese and then separating those layers out. Some of the shots will get through one of the holes, but they'll get stopped. They'll get stopped somewhere else along the way. What should we be thinking about? How can small and solos start protecting themselves so it's more than just, I've got my password taped under the keyboard at the office?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different, strategies. I think before jumping into the strategy, it's important to really understand why are 29% of firms getting breached. And I think there's four kind of core reasons that kind of lead to this. And I'm going to go over them quickly
Sure.
here. But the first is awareness, right? I think a lot of solo, small firms, medium firms don't understand what the threats are, right? They might believe the basics are enough. They're not up to date on today's biggest threats. And a lot of them count on the hope strategy. Again, if you're not comfortable and confident in making a decision, you're going to choose indecision. And that's where a lot of people are stuck. And I think a reason that they're stuck at that point is, the second point, that the second thing that holds them back is a lack of time, right? When I started in 2006 doing IT consulting, I was working hourly, similar to a lot of lawyers. I'd get as much billable time in the day. I'd spend 2-3 hours at night getting through emails and doing the HR and marketing and dealing with admin and tech and all the other stuff, right? And so most lawyers don't have the time to execute all of their responsibilities at a high level. And some responsibilities, it's okay, like getting behind on your books, pretty common thing, right? You might get behind 2-3 months, you power through 1 week and you get caught up. But if you delay addressing your cybersecurity and you leave yourself susceptible to getting hacked, that's not something you can get caught up. Be like, well, I've had a data breach. That's okay. I'll get caught up and I'm okay. Right? So lack of time is the second biggest thing. The third is lack of clarity. The cybersecurity industry is flooded, with solutions. There are so many solutions out there. And if you go to Google, like security, solutions for my law firm, you'll gonna get 10,000 different results. And again, what do I need? How much is too much? How much is too little? What's adequate for my budget? And again, all of those choices are going to lead to inaction. right? And then the fourth and final issue is a failure to implement. So the Thomson Reuters has a state of the US small law firm survey that comes out every year. A lot of really good stuff in there. But one of the things that really stood out from the fourth, they did the fourth one last year, fourth time in 4 years. And one of the things they pointed out is that we often hear about firms making plans to address challenges, but for a variety of reasons, those plans may never actually be put into action. Making a plan without taking any actions does little to actually alleviate the identified problem.
But I
And
feel
in
so
the
good.
chart,
I did all this planning work. That's the same.
I know what the problem is. Good. You don't need to tell me the problem, John. I know what the problem is. I know what the fix is. Okay. I'm just going to stop there. But again, they have all these different charts, and it's like 89% of solos, when it comes to like spending too much time in admin tasks, 89% know what to do, but haven't done anything about it or don't know what to do. And the percentage of firms that actually have done something to address the problem is in the 20 to 30% range usually.
Right.
So that means like, hey, we realize cybersecurity is a problem, but it's been proven over time that we don't know how to address it. And so that's kind of the core, problem and issue. And that's the problem that I set out to solve. For the past 16 years, I've turned away hundreds of lawyers. I always strive to help first and give, guidance and direction. I think you and I talked, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago or so? I think right when you were starting.
3.5 years ago when I was starting out, and you were very kind to say, you're not big enough. Good luck. And,
Yeah. And I've had a lot of those discussions, right? Because just like I talk about, like we have a 10 user minimum with Global Mac IT, right? And so I always strive to give direction and some guidance at least. But I realized, as it happened more and more, I'm like, man, I'm just throwing them back into the wild, and I didn't have a confident other resource I could send them to.
right.
And then what I realized is that what most of them really need help with is not the technology, because in the past 15 years, the tech has gotten so much easier. You can manage your Google Apps or your 365. You can integrate them with Clio and do that stuff pretty easily, right? But where they don't have the skill and experiences when it comes to cybersecurity. And I really started looking, I was like, wow, nobody out there. And I had to Google this probably 30 different ways. And I kept pinching myself because I was like, is there really no one out there who has created a cybersecurity solution specifically for solo and small firms? And I just realized that there's just this, kind of giant need where there's this huge group of people that know it's a threat. I mean, everyone I talk to, they know someone who've had, so many times like, oh yeah, someone down the hall just got breached, and instead of paying the ransom, they just burnt all their computers and bought new ones. I hear all kinds of crazy stories. Maybe I added the burning part, but they threw them out and just bought new ones, right? I hear stuff like that all the time. And so, what we've done, and our solution is kind of the easiest one, but essentially what someone should strive to do is get that multi-layered approach, starting with cybersecurity training, so important. My caveat there is cybersecurity training that doesn't suck and can't be bypassed.
Right.
Because if you've ever been through cybersecurity training, 99% of them are, monotonous, long, 45 minutes, just boring and dull and all kinds of horrible.
Watching PowerPoints, because that's, we learn more by doing. And since I have the floor, I'm going to kind of derail only for a second to go back to one of the kind of side service things that you've seen and is really important to remember is we want to make sure that anytime a client or a potential client comes to us, we don't want to just be tossing them back in the water without an option. Now, a lot of times you may just say, well, look, there may not be any other options other than DIY. And that's when it comes back to us as the owners to think about, is that really the case? For me as an estate planner, I'm focused on higher net worth individuals, but we're figuring out, okay, folks who have called us still want help. They're looking to pay for assistance. I don't want to just say, tough, we're too expensive and toss them back. It's how can I meet them with a product that fits the bill for me and this firm without undermining the pricing structure? So just the quick lesson of we don't want to toss people back out when they come to us. We want to address that issue. Now, back to you. Training that's not awful.
So getting cybersecurity training for everyone in the firm, including and especially the owners. Typically, the owners will think, I know this stuff. I know what to look out for. It's my firm. Don't worry. I'm careful. Right. Just like you thought, like, hey, I'm not going to fall for this. And you didn't, but you thought you did. For
I got lucky.
And again, And I could only imagine again, the energy and emotions that came through your head at that time were real until you realized you hadn't been hacked, right? I mean, I had a lawyer I spoke with 3 months ago, solo, very successful practice, and she was all gung ho, ready to do it, and she never signed up. And then 2 months later, I get a frantic email. She said, "Tom, I've been hacked." We get on a call. She's like, explains everything. She's like, "I've lost 30, 40 hours dealing with this, trying to figure out what happened, canceling client appointments and meetings, missing deadlines," right? And that's what I try to help people realize is like, man, the financial impact. And again, the customer service, having to tell all your clients, "Hey, I'm sorry, I got to cancel all my meetings," whether you choose to tell them why you're not in the moment, it hurts. It's a bad experience. So cybersecurity training, phishing simulation is a really powerful one to use. Everyone's getting phished. You should do it internally to find out who's actually clicking on links, who's actually putting in their credentials, and then have remediation training right after that to say, "Hey, here's what you missed. Here's what you should have noticed. That was the red flag."
Right.
Right. So that continual
Right. I
training.
remember getting an email once. I forget what the domain was, but they'd replaced an M with two N's. And,
Mhm.
like for me, with a person like a name like Strohmeyer, it could have come in as instead of STROHM, it STROHNN. And 99% of people won't catch on to that because they're just looking
Mhm.
at like, oh, that looks like an M.
Yeah, there's so many things to look for, and anyone can fall for it. Again, these cyber criminals, they're not working in their mom's basement, like, with Cheetos in their beers and playing video games. These are organized, businesses. They work a 9 to 5. They wear suits and ties. They read the same, behavior books. They study open rates, and they know that Friday afternoons at 4 p.m., they get the highest click-through rate. Because that's when you're busy, you're trying to get out of the door. You've got your kids, getting hungry, asking for a snack. They know people are working from home, and they're capitalizing on all these things.
4 p.m. Friday,
Um,
I'm updating my email marketing. Oh, sorry.
so IT security policies are an easy one you can check off, put into place, an acceptable use policy for everyone, mobile device management policy, business disaster recovery. So that's kind of a just checkbox. You add it to your HR process and everyone signs it to cover
Yeah,
yourself.
I mean,
Uh,
just thinking internally about what I'm doing, we use Dashlane for password management in the business.
Mhm.
I've got my account. I'm one of the two administrators, and the business passwords get shared there. We also require 95% safety rating from Dashlane of just if your passwords aren't any good, then you've got to raise the level, and it's tracking it. And what it does is I don't have to know their password. I can just go into the console as the administrator and see, oh, this password has dipped. This person is reusing too many passwords. Well, Dashlane's going to generate those automatically. You should be reusing really no passwords, except for the few times there's the website that it's got different domains, and so it's tracking. Dashlane can't tell that these two domains are actually the same account.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Yeah, no, that's super powerful, and that's actually one of the next
oh,
layers we're going to
good.
cover. So the next one is dark web monitoring, and I think it's a crucial piece of your kind of security strategy because 61% of breaches involve credential data, and even if you have perfect password hygiene, you cannot control whether a third-party website gets hacked. Nowadays the only one that makes headlines are the 300 million, credentials exposed, right? But the smaller ones that happen all the time don't make headlines. Now, the criminals don't get paid when they get the breach. They get paid when they go to the dark web, the Amazon for criminals, and they say, "Here, I've got 200 million credentials. Who wants them?" And another criminal comes in and says, "Hey, I'll take 2 million of those. I'll take 5 million from the Netflix, and I'll take 1 million from the TSA, whatever it is." And then they go to work and they start testing out, password combinations. And so dark web monitoring is a service, and there's different ones. Some are we had one that was just crap, in terms of the quality. And we went back to one we originally had, which is way, way better and much more complete. But the way this works, anytime it finds a hit with your domain, then it sends you a notice and says, "Hey, John, we just found a hit. Check to see if this is a password you're currently using. If it is, change your
Right,
password." Right? Just like if you find out that robbers have a copy of your house key, you're going to call the locksmith and change your keys
right, and
ASAP. Right? So that's a really good
right, and
proactive measure.
at a firm I used to work at, the IT policy was every 30 days or 60 days, you had to change your master password. Somewhere along the line, I left that firm. The next firm I went to said, you don't need to do that, because once the password is strong enough, absent there being some sort of breach, it's not really necessary. What's your thinking on that at this point?
I love that you brought this up. A few years ago, the NIST, which is the National Institute of Security and Transportation, they're actually the ones that taught us for 20 years that you have to change your password every 90 days, right? All enterprises and corporations had this standard. So a few years ago, they came out and they said, hey, you know what you told you about that for so long? Yeah, that's actually horrible advice.
Oh,
So don't do it because humans are so predictable. Because what would
add a
everyone
1.
do?
Yeah.
Put a 1 at the end, right? 90 days later, make it a 2. And so they came back and they said, that's horrible advice. What we recommend now is to only change your password once you know it's been compromised, which is great advice. But they just, the sentence
Right.
ended there, which naturally is the next question, which is, okay, well, how do I know when it's been compromised, right? And so that's where dark web monitoring comes in. It scans continually. So if a hit comes up, you can change that password
Right.
proactively.
And
So
again,
that's
this
the
is
other
where,
layer we like.
even with my Dashlane subscription, they're coming back and telling me, you may want to go change these passwords. They've got built in, and here I am. Dashlane's not sponsoring this podcast yet, but they come in and they do say, hey, we saw this. You probably want to change these passwords, or even without any specific dark web monitoring, just knowing, go change this now. That also having the easy tool for them to go in and log for certain accounts, they can go in and automatically change it anytime you hit the, please just cycle this password. Right.
Nice. Yeah, we use, and the next one is the team-based
Right.
password vault that I recommend
Yeah.
everyone should use. So we personally, I've always loved 1Password. I've heard great things about Dashlane. LastPass is another popular one. I don't think the tool matters as much as
Exactly.
using a tool, right? Because like you said, you're not emailing passwords, you're not testing them back and forth. You're a lot less likely to reuse passwords because we reuse passwords because we don't have a password management tool. So it's impossible to remember them
Right.
all,
And
right?
this, it's the sort of thing
So I think
that,
that's definitely a must.
as an estate planner, I had the clients who were here with me for 2 hours beforehand. One of the people in the room said, do we really have to do something online? Can't we just type it all up and put it in a safe deposit box? And my answer was, for my estate plan clients, not even for a business level enterprise, it's going to make your life easier because you only have to remember the 1Password, and then hopefully you've also done 2-factor authentication as well to make sure nobody's gotten into it. But then you only have to remember that 1Password. I barely know my Apple password anymore because it's in there and I don't want to use it. The password is a 20-character gibberish password. I have made it make some sense in my head because, one of the things I learned years ago was something called haystacking, where you just take a similar phrase and you repeat it, make sure it's complicated, and it's going to help generate a lot of I forget if it's entropy or randomness, but nobody's going to guess it if you've got a phrase that repeats a few times, and it makes it easier for you because nobody's going to guess abacadabra, but replacing 4s and whatever it is, nobody's going to guess that. And you can kind of make it easier for you. It takes a 20-character password down to 12.
And when it comes to, creating passwords, if you don't have a password management tool, the typical recommendation is, the longer it is, the more secure it is. So instead of doing a, complete gibberish password like what you described, you can also do, 3 different, unrelated words, right? So you can be like pickle dash speaker dash horse, right? Like, and again, the longer it is, the harder it's going to be to crack. So if you're still not using a password manager, that's one little tip you can use to create some more secure passwords than your kids' names or your pets' names or all the, again, humans
Right, they are.
so
And
predictable.
the Dashlane used to run the howsecureismypassword.org. Their name is no longer on it, so my trust in that website went way down because I just don't know who owns it. But it was great because if you put in, QWERTY or any of the super, password, it would tell you this will get guessed instantly.
Yeah,
Right. And it was
second.
just, my goal was always for my password, it needs to be something that's in the millions of years before it gets brute forced guessed.
Yes. So 3 more security layers. I'll go over them quickly. So the next one is a kind of monitoring, maintenance, and patching tool for your computer, right? Whether it's a Mac or a PC. And you can load antivirus and DNS Web Protection in there as well. So there's a lot of stuff packed in there, but when you have 10, 20 plus more users, or you use a managed service provider, they're all leveraging these tools. And what these tools, they ensure that it keeps your Mac or PC up to date. It installs all the security patches and updates, and it also automates the third-party software updates, which is just a time
Right.
saver right off the bat. It turns off all the Microsoft Office has Microsoft Outlook has an update, Google Chrome has an update, and you stop what you're doing, and you sit there and watch the update. So it kind of takes all that. You still need to run antivirus, and DNS Web Protection is a cool little tool that will block malicious URL domains. So let's say you click on a link in an email and you fall for it. It's likely that this additional layer will catch that and say, hey, this is a known malicious URL domain. We're going to block it. If you really want to go, you can. But it's
Is
going to
this
stop you
something that occasionally on my phone, I run Firefox through a VPN on my phone. Occasionally it'll say, are you sure you want to go here, and turn me back? And these are results almost always straight out of Google or DuckDuckGo. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's similar to that, but there's tools that have like a dedicated,
Okay.
beefier version of that, right? So it's constantly updating these newer, bad IP addresses and URLs. The next thing people should have in place is backup for their most critical data, right? So look at 365 or G Suite. If you're using SharePoint or Google Drive, you've got all of your data, email, contacts, calendars. Find and get a third-party provider. Google and Microsoft are focused on fixing their own mistakes, but they're not responsible when you make a mistake or when a malicious act stops your business cold, right? 64% of data loss is from human error, right? I've had people call me, whoops, I just realized that I accidentally deleted this giant folder 3 months ago, right? And if you don't have a solution like this in place, you're
So
not going to
is
be able to
this
restore that.
thinking through things? It's not just put your things in the cloud-based storage solution, whether it's 365, SharePoint, Dropbox, Citrix, whoever it is. Are you saying have something beyond that outsourced cloud solution?
Yes, have a
Okay.
third-party backup
And
of that data. Google, has a Google Vault, right? They've got a backup tool that you can get and pay $5 more per mailbox or something like that per month. But that has limitations, in itself. And so if Google goes down, can you access that, right? If there's an illegitimate deletion or human error or something like that, you
okay.
might not be able to catch it.
So something
And you look at malware, viruses, ransomware, it's only a matter of time until that makes its way. Right now it primarily affects people with on-site, in-house servers, but it's going to make its way up to the cloud, right? And so if all your data gets encrypted in the cloud in 365 and you don't have a backup, then you might
Yeah,
be
and
stuck
I mean,
and not in a good
and so
place.
it's more than just having the USB plugged into your computer, because if the ransomware comes in and starts infecting your computer, you're not going to be fast enough to unplug the USB. Yeah, I mean, you're just, if you happen to be there, be like, oh,
Yeah, you won't know it
right.
until it's after,
And
until
so
after it's
by
happened.
my count, I think we're
Um,
coming up on the 8th layer of security.
Yes. So the last one is, there's no 100% protection. You can do all of these things and still get hacked. There's no 100%. Tesla is the most safe vehicle on the road, but it does not have a 100% safety rating, right? And so the last one is getting a cyber insurance policy, right? Your business and financial security depend on how well you're protected from a lawsuit or a claim. So you've got to get a cyber insurance policy. It's becoming more and more standard, but there's still a huge percentage that don't have this. And that way, if and when something happens, it includes investigation and calling them and doing the, finding out what was compromised, covering fines and
Wow.
penalties and all that
Tom,
stuff.
I'm looking at the clock right now. We have been talking for a while. Normally I'd
Yeah.
ask, what's the first thing we can do? You just gave us 8 good things to get started with. So I think I'll leave it there, but just toss it over for folks looking to learn more, for looking to train their team. Where can they find you? What can we be doing?
So this is the most salesy part of it today. I hope I've provided a lot of guidance and value, and if you go to bobaguard.com, that's BOBA like Boba Fett, bobaguard.com, what I've done is built a solution that has all of these 8 security layers built in turnkey. So it takes 66 minutes, and it's been made affordable so that a solo lawyer can get access to all these solutions at, it's $150 a month for the first user and $50 for additional users. So we're really democratizing and making all these security solutions accessible. So you can check off all the boxes, go back to work, build the customer experience, focus on the delivery, focus on your services, and not have to spend a whole bunch of time dealing with IT
Excellent.
headaches.
Well, we will have links to that and everywhere else we can find you. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcouncil.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcouncil.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.